Hello and welcome back to the Private Client Podcast. My name is Charlie Chami. I'm an independent financial advisor and director at Glams IFA and co-founder of the Private Client Network. We're a networking group for private client professionals trying to close the gap between our various professions in order to increase our knowledge, improve the service to our clients, and grow our respective businesses. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to Emily Roskilly, co-founder and partner at Roskilly Mills. Emily, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with a congratulations. There's two things that have happened recently. So you were recently shortlisted for Boutique Firm of the Year at the Bristol Law Society Awards, I believe.
Yes, that's right. Yes, we're very excited about that.
And you've recently, Roskilly Mills have recently achieved direct authorization with the SRA, and you've got your own LLP.
Yes, so that happened as of the 1st of November. So yes, you're right. We've had a lot going on.
Which was more work.
Yes, absolutely more work, but very much worth it. Yes.
Good. So it's really interesting because you've done something which is maybe not common in our industry, but certainly a much more well-trodden path in that people leaving larger firms and setting up on their own. But whilst it happens relatively often in financial advice, it does not happen as often in law. So I'm dying to dive into it, but like every good story, we start at the beginning. So to that effect, let's talk about, could I ask you about, rewind all the way. Why did you become a lawyer?
Well, I was not brought up with a family of lawyers, so I'm the first lawyer in my family. I'm from Cornwall, which if anyone knows Cornwall quite well, they'll know Roskilly is a good old Cornish name. So my roots are very much in Cornwall. My family are still there. I'm the first in my family, sort of first generation university, so I wasn't brought up around being driven one way or another. I don't really know. I started studying A-level law, really loved it, looked into going into the police force, believe it or not. Started off then doing some kind of ILEX legal secretarial course down in Cornwall, worked for a criminal defence firm, so got some good exposure, some interesting stories from that. Ended up doing a bit of family law, ended up working a bit for local government, and then eventually, a bit later in life actually, starting my degree, but having had that exposure, having worked in different firms.
I don't think I'd picked up on that. So was that experience in Cornwall at the criminal firm that was prior to university then?
Yes, it was prior to university. So I didn't go to university until I was about 23. But by that time, I had done lots of ILEX qualifications and I'd had lots of experience in different firms.
Well, that's good. I mean, in some ways, you went, well, in a very big way, you went into it with a lot, sort of your eyes much wider open than maybe some other people who choose it sort of straight at 18.
Yeah.
But with actually probably relatively little understanding of what practicing might entail, whereas I guess you actually got to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So went into it.
What kind of criminal law was it?
Well, it's criminal defence firm. So actually, I worked for someone that used to be the head of the CPS in Cornwall and then set up a defence firm, which was really interesting. And so I was around.
It wasn't Keir Starmer by any chance?
No.
He was head of the CPS, no. Wasn't he?
Down there, down in Cornwall and Devon. But yeah, so it was interesting and I'd had that exposure and I think that is really important. So I'm really supportive of people that are doing apprenticeships and things now because I think it's great and I think it stands you in really good stead.
I think it does. So was it that experience where you're like, actually, this is a fascinating area. I really want to go into it. And is that why you decided to go to sort of university and
yeah,
study?
I've always been quite a people person. So I'm not surprised I've ended up in private clients. I've always wanted to kind of help others and really support others. That's quite a natural instinct that I have. And I suppose the two just collided and I've ended up doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So university, LPC.
Yeah.
I was talking to quite a few other people about how the routes have changed, but I think when you studied, it was still fixed. It had to go in that order. You
It
needed a
was
degree.
fixed. When I graduated, the recession had hit, and it was really difficult to get training contract. It was difficult anyway, and I just wanted to get my foot in the door. So I remember meeting BWV and saying, "I'll do anything. Just take me on. I'll be a paralegal." I'd had my first class law degree. I was reluctant to start my LPC because I didn't have a training contract, and I was really wanting that before I took that leap of faith. But I did my LPC 2 years part-time, was working full-time for VWV, and they were very
Okay.
supportive, really supportive. But it was tough because every third weekend, you're having to study and then you're working full-time.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that when, because it's in financial advice, it's really common that people are studying and working. And I remember when I was going
Sure.
through the exams, suddenly you look back at time at university and you're like, wow, that all seems so luxurious by comparison to sort of full-time job in the day and having to fit studying evenings and weekends. It's yeah, it's definitely
You have to
quite
be
a bit
quite
harder.
disciplined, don't you? Yes.
Yes, yeah.
So it all lined up in the end, and I was really fortunate. And VW were very supportive. I did my training contract with them, and I stayed with them for 13 years. I was there. So yes,
It's really good, and that took away a lot of the risk as well, because I do know people who studied, did the LPC, and then weren't able to get a training contract. So to be able to secure it and then sort of do the LPC alongside, I mean, that's great because you knew you had a role at the end of it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Was it difficult, that application process? So you started at VWV, but
I
would you
started as
recommend?
a paralegal, literally just I was in the contentious probate department, and but that overall her private client had sort of non-contentious, contentious, and family within its umbrella, which it
Yeah,
still does now. And so, you just get really good exposure. And I think if you're really keen and you're really enthusiastic, which are my top tips for anyone, just put yourself out there and go for it because you've got nothing to lose. And people are always really helpful of having extra support, and it's great to have someone that's really keen to learn. So I think, yeah, that's what I did. Went to any BD event I could. I tried to open as many doors as I could, and I've always kind of had quite an interest in BD and meeting others, and I think that's just sort of carried through.
yeah, it's really helpful, and it's something that a lot of solicitors don't always get exposure to early in their careers. There's often times where they're sort of head down, you know,
Yeah,
logging logging billable hours and basically performing the role of being a solicitor. And then maybe the BD stuff is something that's added on later, maybe when people want to progress. And sometimes it can come a bit of, I don't know, maybe a bit of a shock is and not quite right, but kind of depending on what you've done earlier on in your career.
yeah, I agree. So I think getting exposure to it is good. And then over the course of your career, if you've built up those links and those someone's been at the same level as you maybe, or you've grown alongside, a barrister that you might know and work with, and then you naturally progress and you just stay in touch. And if you build those relationships from the early days, I think that can really stand you in good stead.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's something that's hard. It's hard to replicate the relationship you have with people that you knew when you were both young.
Yeah.
You can do it, and you can absolutely form good relationships later, but there's something kind of special about seeing people progress through their careers from when you were both junior to then sort of progress and make partner or whatever sort of stages you go through.
Absolutely. So when I was first year of my law degree, I worked for Smith and Williamson at the time,
Ah,
and I was just doing some
our
like
world.
admin work for tax directors. But I met and connected with a lot of people, and I recently found out that Helen Bassett, who was at then was kind of training and doing her exams, is now managing partner
Oh, wow.
at and so at Evelyn now, because it's not Smith and Williamson and it's
Yeah.
changed over the course of time. And that just is an example of, you meet someone years and years and years ago, and then your paths cross. And now I've got this firm set up, and now she's the managing partner. And it just shows the journey that we, yeah, have been on. So I think it's quite a good example.
When you, so when you, that's interesting that you started off in our world. And again, private client related. So
Yeah.
when you were training, was it in private client work or did you any corporate seats at all?
I did four different seats. So I did my first seat in commercial. because I wanted something, and I think VW wanted something very different, because I was in contentious probate private client for 2 years. So firstly it was commercial, then I moved to employment, and then I moved to property litigation, and then I went back as my fourth seat to contentious probate.
And what was it about the private client side of things that appealed?
People will say you're either a litigator or you're not a litigator, and eventually you find out. And I think the training contract really helps with that, because you're getting different exposure. And I suppose I'd had the benefit of the previous experience, so I knew I wanted litigation. I think I didn't really know much about contentious probate. Like, it was a whole new area to me, but it was very much, about people, about families often. And so when I started working within it, I just got a real feel for it and a real passion for it, I suppose. And I very much kept an open mind during the training contract, but I think ultimately that's where I wanted to
You knew
head back.
what you wanted to
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
So was that your specialism throughout your time? So once the training contract was finished, the 13 year sort of the remainder of those 13 years at VWV,
So
was it?
I have always been told to be really agile throughout my career. I remember the managing partner at VWV saying, "Be agile, go for it." And so what I did for a few years is I worked across the family team and the contentious probate team. So I'd have some family cases, because I'd had a background of working in family law, and then I'd also work with the Inheritance Act claims. And there is a bit of similarity in that, in terms of you're dealing with people and families. And then as I became a mum, I found that more difficult, because I went to part-time and it was very difficult to work across both teams. So I ended up having to make a decision, and that was tough, but I made the decision to work within contentious probate. And then fast forward to second baby, coming back from second maternity leave, and I had a really good relationship with the head of the family team, Sam Hickman. She's still there. And she said, "I've got this case. It's an unmarried couple. It's civil procedure rules. It's Talata. I just want you to be able to deal with it. You're the woman for the job." And that was the case of Hudson Hathaway, which eventually, and who was to know, ended up in the Court of Appeal. So I came back from mat leave, I took on that case, gave it my all, and then started to kind of build up this work of advising unmarried couples, which is kind of, that's one of our services now, that and contentious probate. So really built and developed a niche for myself off the back of that case.
It kind of segues really, really nicely. But to cap off well, first of all, actually, I was listening to one of your podcasts last night, and you mentioned Talata there. What is that for the non-solicitors on
So
listening?
it's Trust of Land and Appointment of Trustees Act, and we are doing a lot of, hopefully, getting out there and raising awareness. So we still meet lots of people now that say, we are common law spouse, we've got rights, we've got children together, and we are the ones that have to break the news that you don't. As in, there isn't a matrimonial pot, there isn't the Matrimonial Causes Act, there isn't the equivalent. And often what you're finding when unmarried couples separate is that you're often looking at a property. And sometimes that can be in the sole name, or it can be in joint names. And often you're looking at, over the course of time, is that intentions can change, or somebody's put in a massive amount of work for renovation. And so what you're often looking at is Talata. And that law is governed, it's dealt with by civil procedure rules. So it's not dealt with in the family court. It's not dealt with under family procedure rules. And it's trust law and trust case law which applies. So it is very niche.
This is the law that kicks in when unmarried couples are separating. This is sort of the body that is
If
referred
there's a
to.
dispute about the property, yes, yeah.
Okay. And were you doing this sort of work before you left VWV, and
Yes.
that became a specialism there? So
Yeah, so I was doing this work at VWV, and I was working across the family team and then working across the contentious probate team, the two areas. And I just noticed more and more, couples are not getting married. It's on the rise. It's the fastest growing family type. The law, there is a campaign, a massive campaign to reform. And we've actually recorded a podcast with Andy Hayward, who's like a professor at Durham, who is heading up the reform campaign. But at the moment, the law really is out of step with modern day society. And so people are finding themselves having to look to get advice in what is a really niche area. And I think you have to be really careful who you go to for that advice.
It's the same. It's the same in our world, you know. It's the same. So, you know, there's significant tax advantages to being married. There's significant advantages on death with inheritance tax law, and how nil rate bands are passed between married couples or spouses, and capital gains tax rules that are very favorable. So there is a whole body of rules that I guess cross our both of our sectors. Um,
Yes.
that the rules aren't quite well. I suppose that, I mean, back in the day, everyone got married, so there was no problem. I guess
Yes,
it's
sure.
society's just changed very slightly. So it's I guess a relatively recent issue that's yet to be addressed.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, there are huge campaigns for reform, and we're very supportive of that, and we think the law should change. But we still feel that that's not necessarily going to wipe out our business, because whatever comes into place, people are still going to need advice. And we don't just, it's not just in the kind of couple context. So there might be a dispute between family members on the ownership of a property, and again, that's Talata. So in that respect, it wouldn't change those sorts of cases.
Okay, so you're at VWV. You've been there a long time. You've got this specialism in this sort of new and emerging area of law. Um, and you decide to set up on your own. And as I said at the start, it does happen. It's definitely something that happens, but it's not super common. You and Lucia, you were at separate firms, so
Yes, we were.
so
Yes, but
how did the idea come about? Or what point were you like, you know what, I'm going to set up my own law firm?
um, I suppose, without going down the whole lockdown story, I was in lockdown with two quite small children. I
Yeah,
had this case which was heading to the Court of Appeal. It wasn't them, but it was a lot of work, had quite a heavy caseload. I didn't take furlough. I had that option to do that, but I was keen to keep building up my cases because I'd had maternity leave. And at the time, I said no to furlough. I didn't know how long lockdown was going to be. So anyway,
no.
I dug deep. It was really hard going. We've all got our story from lockdown. And in the back of my mind, I've always wanted my own thing. I didn't mention it earlier, but my grandparents had their own business. So I grew up around a grandfather that he had a seed company, and he'd sell seed to all the farmers in the southwest. And I'd go around with him, and where he'd do his business and his deals. And I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. And I had a grandmother that was really entrepreneurial. So I grew up around that, and I was exposed to that. And I was always wanting my own thing. And I had this book on my shelf, like How to Start Your Own Law Firm. And I don't know,
So from
just
early
something
days.
just triggered it. Something just triggered it. I think the hard work of lockdown, and so the story with Lucia is Lucia and I were on opposite sides of cases often. She was the only solicitor I knew that was just working advising unmarried couples. So
Yeah.
she had that niche. Everybody else, they were doing family law and the unmarried couple work, or a mix, but she was solely focused on that. And I kept meeting her for coffee saying, wouldn't it be great? And she was like, no, it really wouldn't. I'm
No,
a
it
mum of
wouldn't.
two.
It's gonna.
It's not happening. I was like, it's going to happen. Like, I'm going to keep meeting you for coffee. And we joke. But we just really hit it off. When you just go for a coffee sometimes with someone and you just hit it off. And we've obviously got a lot in common. We've both got two children. And I was really keen. I just thought if we team up, this would be great. And then eventually it happened. Here we are.
Well, look, serious congratulations. I mean, it's a really impressive achievement. It's not something that's done by many others. So I really think it's great. And also, I suppose in doing so, you get to really specialize in the area that you feel you know the best, where you can add the most value. So what parts of your respective jobs in your previous firm? So what is the offering for Roskilly Mills?
In terms of the services we provide,
Yes, is it in those areas? So is it
it's just those two areas we don't touch it. So we always say, and surprising, we still get quite a few people contact us. We are not family lawyers. We don't touch divorce,
Yeah,
children. We don't do conveyancing. We can't do any. We are very niche, and we just offer these two services, and we stick with what we do because that's what we do best, and we don't dabble in anything else. So,
yeah,
but still, people will come to us because people that are going through divorce, because they'll hear our podcast or they'll think, actually, I really like the feel of that and that supportive, that team approach, and we are very collaborative. That is one of our core values. We don't just say we're collaborative, we're actively going out there and being collaborative and working with others.
Yeah.
And I think people need that. Things have changed. People don't just need a lawyer that will tell them the law. I mean, it's great, that's what we do, but they need so much more. And I think we can give that, hopefully. And it's just got a different feel about it.
Yeah, so true. And I don't know if it was maybe different if you rewind the clock 20 years or more, whether the relationship between clients and advisors on our side or solicitors on your side was maybe more formal or more technical. But I completely agree. I mean, the personal side of it is absolutely massive. The reassurance side of it, people come in with worries and hopefully leave reassured. I think it's really interesting. So that in our world, there's been a new raft of regulation where we have to measure, we have to objectively measure how we're delivering value to our clients. But one of it, the hardest part of it, was trying to capture the softer stuff. Like, how do you capture? So from a client point of view, they might say, well, the biggest thing is that we don't have to worry. And I was like, yeah, how do I put that in a spreadsheet for the regulator?
Absolutely, it's tough. Yeah, yeah. But I think it is really important. And I think people are looking for so much more. People are looking for a human being that's had a bit of life experience that can relate to some of this. And I can, and I actively, I said on my website, I have been through this. I have been in an unmarried relationship, and sadly, in lockdown, I separated. So I've stood in the shoes that lots of these clients have stood in. And I think that gives you, again, just another kind of, you've just got a bit more of an understanding, you may be a bit more empathetic, and all the things that I wanted, and all the kind of, because it's not just the separation. It might be something, you might need support from a child play therapist, or you might need, I don't know, a co-parenting coach, or you might need financial advisor. And when you're in a really tough
Definitely is the answer
situation,
to that question.
you need your team, and you need to just be able to access them without trawling through the internet. And some often, we all work off recommendations, don't we? And we kind of work together. And I think, if we can put a podcast series or articles out there, just informing people and having the option of having that available. And that was the drive behind the Journey Through Separation podcast. It was, if you need a 30-minute quick listen to this person, it's there for you. And in the same way, we offer resolution guidance when people are separated. We've got something we can provide to them, which is a manual about how best to co-parent. So where we can, we provide our clients with so much more than just, this is the law.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds so good. And I think it's really needed. And I think law can be quite intimidating still for a lot of people. And a bit more of a personal approach. I think it'd just be great. And I'm sure it's appreciated by your clients. How do you and Lucia split the work? Do you both work on everything, or do you have, even within
No,
the firm, areas where you
we have
specialize?
we have our own caseloads. We know about our clients and our caseloads. We work quite closely on that, but I think that works best because you develop that rapport with the client. So Lucia's purely the unmarried couple work, the Talata work, or the cohab agreements, whatever crops up in that respect. And then I deal with the contentious probate work, but I also work within unmarried couple disputes. So I try and keep an even mix, although there's sometimes not, sometimes if contentious probate case might take precedence because I'm, for instance, going to trial, or, something like that. So
Sure.
that's how it is. We're very keen to grow those two areas. We're very keen to grow our team. And up until last Friday, we, obviously we became an LLP. So that means that we can we are actively recruiting. So we're currently looking for a paralegal to join our team. And yeah, we're busy, which is really good, but we're
I'll put
wanting
that
a
in the
really
show notes about the
good
paralegal.
solid team. Yeah. A shameless plug for a paralegal.
Nothing shameless about a plug. On the regulatory side, because I'm personally really interested in it, because I think it's
Yeah.
a journey. But for anyone who's listening who would have no idea, I mean, what is involved? Like, what are high level? What
Yeah.
does it take to start a firm? What do you have to do?
We were lucky because we had a platform, so we traded through a limited company. That's my partner's company. So we were lucky to have that, and that gave us good stability, a guaranteed salary for 12 months. And obviously, we were SRA regulated through that company, but it was very much the look and feel of a separate entity. We had our own website, we had our own clients, we had all of our own agenda. So we were really lucky to have that. Often people don't have that. So SRA approval, you have to apply for SRA approval. It can take 3 months. You have to make sure, obviously, you've got PI in place. That's really chunky, hefty fee, but it's needed. It's crucial. You have to build your team in the same way you would if you're going through separation. You know, you need your really solid accountants. You need your really good corporate lawyer to draw up your, you know, company documents. And fortunately, Lucia and I have worked in the Bristol market all of our careers. So we have built really good connections. And so when we were looking for all these people and lining up who we were going to use and pull in to support us, that was quite good, and it was quite an easy process. So I think it's just about organisation, a list of who you need. SRA is key, and you can wait 3 months for it.
Yeah.
Sometimes longer, but generally 3. Do you know what's really key, I think, to all of this is I did a lot of background research. I mean, I met people that had set up their own firm. So there were 2 employment lawyers that were up for Anstey, I think, that had set up an employment niche practice. I'd spoken to, you know, Harbour Family Law. We knew about Brigstow. We knew about the family law practice, and it was about going and meeting those people and getting the true story of what does it take? Is it possible? We are 2 mums. We do also have to carry on being mums. We can't just exhaust ourselves.
No,
And the
they're
business
there
needs a
every day,
lot,
right?
but
I
you know,
mean,
when you've got 2 girls, they need mum, you know. So it's kind of, is it possible? And I think there's a lot of scaremongering, if I'm honest, because even now we often get, oh, that's brave, you know, that's a really bit, and it is. But I mean, somebody said to me, you can outsource a lot of things, Emily. You don't have to do all of it on your own. There are compliance
yeah,
teams out there that provide that support, and it's just getting the right people in place.
you're right. I think there is a lot of scaremongering that goes on, and but actually, if you do know the law, and if you can provide a good science service and add value to your clients in a regulated way, like there should be no barrier to setting up on your own. But at the same time, acknowledging that it is a lot of time, and there are hoops you will need to jump through, regulatory hoops like PI insurance, all kinds
Yes,
of stuff
of
that you sort
course, all those things. Yeah.
and probably in your world, I imagine getting the sort of templated documents, that sort of your stash of materials that you're not writing from scratch every time you
Yeah.
say anything. I probably was it. Did that take a bit of time as well?
It takes time. It has taken time. It has been really hard work, and I'm brutally honest about that. I don't think, it's really hard work. There are times when, you're working really long hours, you're working weekends, you're working nights, but you've got, like with everything in life, you've got to put the groundwork in.
Sure.
You just have to. There's no shortcuts. Well, none that I found.
I think a
So,
big one is
yeah.
financial reserves as well. So like when it's discussed in our world, I think when people are being really honest about setting up on their own, they sort of talk about, look, you need your first 6 months income taken care of, ideally, or, if not more, if it's
Yeah.
possible. Like really, I think if you have some sort of a financial cushion, I think that can make a huge difference too.
Yeah, and that was why it was great to have that platform for a year, because it allowed us to build up profit. There was an agreement that we could use that profit, obviously, and bring that across to the LLP. So we have been fortunate, but we've worked really hard to achieve what we have. And I think, if that platform hadn't been there, we were both really keen to just go for it. I think the time had come, definitely. There was something about turning 40 that
Yeah.
just pushed me. I don't know, there's something about it. I've spoken to lots of people about that, and they said, yeah, actually, we had the same thing. It was a bit of a turning point. So
Well,
yeah.
also, I think it's probably around the same time maybe that you get to a level of professional competence and
Yeah.
therefore
So yeah.
confidence that you're like, actually, I know this job. So therefore, trying to learn the business side of it feels more attainable because you feel like you've got the actual service down. I think
Yeah,
probably
and
if you're
and
if
that and the 2 girls being in primary school, that was a game changer.
yeah
But I think there should be choice in the market for clients. I don't think, I mean, I'm a bit a big fan of the small niche boutique, and I also think there's a place for the big, larger firms. But I think clients need to have that choice. There are clients out there that really need help, that can't afford really high, crazy hourly rates, and
Yeah.
so but still need that specialist support and advice. And so I think I think has been good. We've kind of brought a bit more of a choice to the Bristol market in these two niche areas.
And to be frank, something that I often think is that the high whoever you deal with in life, whether it's in accountancy or law, financial advice, or any other service, you're dealing with an individual at the other side. And no matter the size of the firm or the prestige of a firm, that person
Yeah.
may be good or they may not be. And it doesn't always follow the price guarantees quality. And actually, a lot of the fee might be paying, it's not necessarily paying for the person, it's paying for the offices and the
Mm.
and other related costs to the business that just aren't so high in smaller firms.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree.
It's brilliant. Thanks so much for coming on. It's been really interesting talking to you. I think the both of you have got a really good proposition, and I think you guys will do great. So thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks ever so much.
And catch up with you both soon.